Hey peeps, welcome to another video. Today it is part 5 of the Celine Bag sew along. So today we are going to be sewing together the exterior of our bag. So let's get started. Okay, so the very first thing that we're going to do for the exterior of the bag is take our 2 pocket tab pieces. These are the 6" long by 1" wide, and you should have 2 of them. You're going to press under the 2 short ends and then press each tab in half. Now as I say, I've made these longer than the pattern requires because I am using a shorter zip. I just find it easier for the side seams, which can get quite bulky, to have a shorter zip in place rather than the longer one that they recommend. So I've got an 8" zip here, and what we're going to do is we're going to sandwich our zip in between that pocket tab, and we're going to top stitch along here, and we're going to do that for both sides of the zip. After doing that, you should end up with something that looks a little bit like this. Next thing we need is the exterior pocket panel, and what you're going to do is find the center of the zip, and it's going to be zip face down, and you're going to sew that to the top straight edge of the exterior pocket panel, and you're going to sew that at 1/4 inch. So you need to find the center of the zip, that's the important part, so that it ends up with the tabs nice and even on each side. So I've marked the center of the zip, and that's the center of the zipper tape. So by folding those 2 edges together, found the center there, and then I've got the center of my exterior pocket panel. And you want your zipper pull to be over to the left as you're looking at it, and we're going to, as I say, match up the edge of the zip with the straight raw edge of the top of the exterior pocket panel. I'm going to pin that into place, or clip that into place, and then sew at 1/4 inch. Okay, so once you've sewn the zip in at 1/4 inch, you want to then take one of the pocket panel lining pieces, and you want to pin that right sides together with the exterior so that you're creating a zip sandwich, and then you're going to sew over that line of stitching again at 1/4 inch. So you want to end up with something that looks like this. So you have your zip sandwiched between your exterior and your interior pockets. We're going to go and press that, and then we're going to top stitch along this edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry on sewing because I want to get as many processes done before I have to get up and go to the irons. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have our pocket lining piece this way, so right side up with the zip wrong side up, and we're going to take our other pocket lining panel, and we're going to find this center of this and find the center of our zip again, and then we're going to sew the straight edge of our pocket lining panel to the straight edge of the zip so that it ends up looking like that when it's sewn. So I'm going to find the center of the pocket lining panel, I'm going to find the center of the zip again, match those up, and sew at 1/4 inch that long top edge, raw edge, to the top edge of the zipper. Okay, so I have sewn the second pocket lining to the top of the zip. So if you have a look inside, we have got 2 right sides together and then the exterior. So what we need to do now is take our top front panel, and we're going to line that up on along that raw edge that we've just sewn, and again sandwiching our zipper, and we're going to sew that at 1/4 inch using our previous line of stitching as a guide, and sew that down. We're then going to go and press everything and top stitch everything. Okay, so I've pressed the back pocket panel up and the top front panel up, and then I have pressed the exterior pocket panel down, and then the lining pocket panel down. So now I'm going to top stitch along both of those edges, and the thing that you need to be careful of is that you are top stitching so that nothing is getting caught underneath. You want everything to be away from each other so you're not closing up any pockets, because if you sew close a pocket you will have to unpick it and you will be cursing. Ask me how I know. Okay, so I've top stitched both sides of the zip. Now the next thing we want to do is to baste the pocket pieces into place so that they are perfectly formed for when we attach the gussets later. And to do that you need to fold the zipper tab kind of in half to bring the zip so it's on its side rather than flat. And you're going to fold down and pin or pin or clip all of these 3 layers, so the 2 pockets and the exterior panel, together all around the curves. And to get, like I say, to get that done, you're going to need to fold the zipper tabs in half. So I'm going to do that and I'll come back and show you once it's done. So you can see here I've matched up the raw edges so that I have all 3 layers, so the 2 pocket layers and then this outer layer. And to do that I've had to pinch the pocket tabs in half so that the zip is sitting, as I say, on its side rather than flat. I'm going to baste all the way around here at 1/4 of an inch because the seam allowance is 1/2 inch, so I'm going to get that all basted together so that I can then move on to the gussets. Okay, so we're going to sew the short straight edges of our gussets together at 1/2 an inch seam allowance, and you want to make sure that you've got a pair going together, and you should have 2 of those that will look like this. So we're going to sew this short edge together with 1/2 an inch seam allowance. Once you've sewn at 1/2 an inch, what you're going to then do is open up the seam like this, and you're going to run a line of top stitching to either side of this crease, this seam here, and you're going to use the same top stitching length that you've been using for the rest of the bag, and that's just butterflying the seam to make sure that the seam allowance is nice and flat, and we're going to do that for both gussets. So once you've got your seams top stitched down like that, we're then going to attach the gussets to the front pocket, the front panel, and also the back panel, which I have here. So you want to make sure that it is the longer edge that you're attaching, not the shorter edge. The shorter edge is what gets attached to the other gusset, so it's the longer edge that gets attached to the back panel and the front panel with the pocket. The thing you want to do again is you want to find the center of the bottom curved edge of both the front and back, and you're going to match up the center that you found with here. You're then going to, once you've pinned the center, you're then going to pin the long edge to the top, and then you're going to pin, or in my case wonder clip because you don't want to pin through vinyl, towards the corners and ease everything in around the corners, and you're then going to sew that at 1/2 inch. So I'm going to get that all pinned in place or clipped in place, and then I'll show you what it looks like. So it will all fit, you just need to use a lot of pins or clips. As I said before, you want to sew with the gusset side up because this is the one that's going to misbehave, so we're going to make sure that we don't get any tucks or puckers when we're going around the corner, but we're going to sew this at 1/2 inch the whole way around. Okay, so I've got the gussets sewn to the front panel with the zipper in it and also the back panel. I've clipped into the curves around these edges, and now we are going to top stitch, and it's going to be stitching the seam allowance to, so the seam allowance and everything is pressed towards the gusset, and we're going to be top stitching along this edge around the gusset the whole way around both the front and the back. Okay, so top stitching is done all around there. So now I want to add in the foam. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to sew it to the seam allowance. The seam allowance is here around this edge and not catching anything else, and I will probably end up trimming a little bit away from the top edge as well so that I don't have to deal with that when I'm top stitching the top edge of the bag when it's finished. So I'm going to do that to both sides, and I'm doing that because having made this, you can see it's very floppy even with the interfacing and the sort of decor weight fabric I'm using, so I want a little bit more stiffness. So like I say, I'm going to sew the foam into both of those now. So you can see that I've clipped the foam to the seam allowance of the gusset and the bag outer itself. So I'm going to go around and just stitch sort of like 1/4 inch away so that the foam is attached, and I'm going to do that for the back panel and also the front panel. Once you've sewn your foam into the seam allowance, you should end up with a back and front panel that look like this. So the next step is to actually sew these two together, and it's right sides together, not the way that I've just put them together, but we are going to sew along this edge to attach the front to the back. Once you've clipped everything together, you should end up with the right sides together on the inside, and you can obviously kind of pop one gusset one way and one gusset the other way so they fit together nicely. I'm going to clip everything together because again I'm using vinyl, so no pins in vinyl, and I'm going to sew that seam at 1/2 inch seam allowance the entire way around. So once you have sewn the two sides together, you should end up with something that looks a little bit like this. What you're going to want to do now is you're going to want to top stitch the seam allowance down on each side. My battery's dying, 2 secs. Okay, where were we? Right, so you want to open your bag out so that it's nice and, well, flat at the bottom. But what we want to do is we are going to top stitch our seam allowance down. So you're going to run a line of stitching to either side of the seam here to finish off the outside of the bag. So you're going to use the same top stitch length that you've been using throughout the process, and again I'm going to use my blind hem foot to do that because of the guide. I can run the guide through here. It is possible, it's just you need to take it slow, and it is a little bit tricky to get into here, but like I say, if you take it slow and make sure that the important thing is that the seam allowance gets sewn down to each side like that. I'm going to attempt to film some of this process, but I think you'll soon see why this is a little bit awkward to try and get this under the presser foot. But like I say, the important thing is that you make sure that the seam allowance is either side butterflied open, as it were, and just go slowly. No one's ever going to know how fast you go except for everybody who's watching me go slowly. You'll all know, but yeah, and you just want to make sure and feel that your seam allowance is nice and open. You can usually feel that through the fabric on the top anyway, but you want to, that's what you're aiming to do in this process, so you want to be nice and careful about that. Wish me luck. And yeah, didn't think it was going to be visually illuminating for you. I need a GoPro on my glasses. Once you've wrestled that all under your machine, this is what you should end up with. 2 lines of top stitching either side of that seam, and then the inside should look like this, and so should the bottom. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to measure this bottom piece here to cut a piece of foam to put that in to stabilize it, and then also put the feet in. So you want to measure from around about here, so like where it starts to curve around, and then you also want to measure the width from there to there, and you want to bear in mind that you're going to be sewing the foam into this seam allowance, so you need to take that into account as well. So I'm going to measure mine, and I'm not going to be able to do it and hold you at the same time, so I'll measure mine and then show you what, tell you what my measurements were, and show you kind of, if I can, how I took them. So what I did was I took my ruler and I kind of placed, I knew it was going to either sort of like be 10 or 9 or 10 inches, so I placed the 4.5 inch mark in the center line here, and that kind of finishes there, and then if it was 10 inches, it kind of starts to just turn the corner at the 10 inch point. So I'm going to go for the 9 inches wide, and then it's 5.5 deep. So my foam is actually 6 inches deep. Ideally I would have made it a little larger than that. I've got a piece that is 6 inches wide, and the bag itself is 5.5, so that's going to just about work. So what I then did was cut out my piece of foam, and I've marked the center point so that I can match it up with these center pieces here, and then I've marked 1 inch in from each edge, and that's where my feet are going to go. So I'm going to sew the foam into the bag first, and then I'm going to install the feet. The next thing that we're going to do is install our hardware. There's loads of different ways of doing this, and Emmeline Bags has lots and lots of really informative videos on installing the majority of their different types of hardware. For me, as we've discussed, we've marked in where it's going to go. I like to use an awl. Right, different camera angle. Right, what you want to do is you want to make sure that everything is kind of like lying nice and flat in the bag. So I've kind of got my fingers there making sure that everything is nice and smooth. I'm going to poke a hole through the cross point and go all the way down. Then you want to take your foot and you're going to post it through that hole that you've just made so that the prongs come out like that. Put the prongs through just the one, and this will chip your nail polish, ask me how I know. And then you want to open them up like that, and then just repeat that process for all 4 feet. Once you've done that, you're going to want to put some scraps of the Pellon interfacing over the top of this, just so that this then doesn't rub on the lining of your bag. So I'm going to do the last 2 and then we can move on. If you have any questions at all, please let me know in the comments section down below and I will do my best to answer them for you. I really hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and I'll see you again very soon. Bye!